Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon and welcome to the post 98 from underconfidence to curation of the self. Oh, this is exciting, and this post is pretty well always comes via request, and this comes from a request by LJ. I'll just do it as initials and I'll read you a little bit of LJ's email request of me. Quote, "Dear Tara, thank you very much for the posts. Their realness, the understanding of difficulties of life and relationships and work have helped me. I'm angry a lot, but I think that anger is masking underconfidence." Interesting. "I know I'm doom scrolling, but my doom scrolling is fixated on all these people making a big deal of themselves. They're so confident, they're like a walking advertisement for a successful person. I don't think I'm jealous, but I feel like I'm being squeezed, made to feel small, the great shrinking woman. What can I do to feel better? I think I'm asking for a post on confidence, but not really. How do I manage the confidence of others and not feel buffeted?" End of quote. Amazing message. Thank you, LJ. And I have been thinking about and preparing this post for 2 months. I've read some very odd stuff. I've read some really interesting emerging literature, some very old theory that we're going to rejuvenate today. And I've also done 2 courses for you. One of them was on happiness coaching from an old goth, and the other one was on lifestyle and lifestyle expertise. Fascinating area. But we're going to try and offer an argument today, as I think some of our best posts have, an argument for your consideration, and you can absolutely disagree with me, and I want you to. But I want to talk about the irrational and fictional confidence in so many people. And we're going to look at how and why it is constructed and what we do with it. But then I want to walk with you. We're going to have a conversation about that confidence, but also we're going to put strategies in place for you today so that you can manage and negotiate with the confidence of other people. We're going to explore this small but increasingly interesting literature on the curation of the self. And we're going to focus on the building of very, very clear boundaries and interfaces around you. What we're trying to do is convince you to center yourself in your life. Be dispassionate in the configuration of your own successes and failures, your own expressions of learning and living. But yes, you need to know, and we all need to know, that you are always enough. You're living a real life, and your real life has value. You are not living your life for the consumption of other people. Full stop. So we have 3 sections today. I want to explore firstly what's happening and provide a theoretical model for us to take for a walk. Then we're going to look at the options that are available through that new literature of curation of the self. And we're going to finish off with a quick 5 quick strategies for you to implement today. And really, they're not only strategies, they're decisions. 5 decisions for you to make today that will protect you, enhance you, and center you. But we're going to start with what's happening, why everybody is so damn confident at the moment. And they're confident in a way. If people want to be confident, that's their business. But why I'm concerned is the confidence is based on reifying and reducing the needs of others. That's the challenge. And yes, we are going to go to Erving Goffman. Goffman was a marginal and marginalised sociologist, but it's interesting because he studied the marginal and the marginalised. He's been out of scholarly fashion since his death in 1982, but interestingly, through the rise and proliferation of digitisation and social media, he is indeed back. And some very strong monographs have arrived in the last 5 or 6 years to enable his revisioning. And much of the attention today, was a prolific scholar, but much of his attention today focuses on his two books, The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life, published in 1959, and Stigma, published in 1964. Still remarkable books. They'll change your life. Read them before you die. And a great recent revisioning of the way in which these theories operate comes from Jürgen Raab in his monograph Irving Goffman from the Perspective of the New Sociology of Knowledge. This is a truly great book. It's in our reference list. Again, I recommend it to you. Read it before you die. And he explores how interactions emerge in our social order. So how do our social circumstances organize the self? Yeah. So the presentation of self in everyday life probed the social life that we all live with attention to our physical relationships with others, proxemic codes. But of course, where the literature is moving now is into the online environment, increasing the stages that are available to us, to all of us, in terms of rehearsing behaviour. So Goffman is best known for creating the tropes of the front stage and the back stage. And these concepts existed through that remarkable book, The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life. And that was based on his doctoral research in the Shetland Islands. But this empirical research in the Shetland Islands couldn't find a publisher. Again, this is a great story too. So the empirical work couldn't find a publisher. So he rewrote his PhD as a theoretical monograph, and it found a publisher and he built a career. So front stage refers to the roles and behaviours that exist in public. This, Goffman argues, is where particular behaviours are summoned because we know that we're being watched. These behaviours are intentional, they're purposeful, and yes, they can become habitual. It is a script that we follow that frames our daily life, and it frames daily life by normative behaviours and values. So we occupy and live in a frame. And again, Goffman later on in his career did a great book on the frame, which again I recommend to you. So to give an example of this, think about what we do when we're waiting in a line at a bank, or we're waiting to pay in a grocery shop, we're going out to dinner. We don't think about this behaviour, but we are aware we are in public and we queue and we don't create a lot of mischief, and we know what is expected of us in these circumstances and we behave accordingly. These are front stage behaviours, performances of expected behaviour. Right, now front stage, cool. We now move to backstage. Backstage is different. This is where we're more free of the expectations of others. We're more relaxed, we're more comfortable, and yes, it is more real. But what also happens, and this was the brilliance, I think, of Goffman's work, is that in the backstage, we rehearse behaviours for the front stage. In particular, we start to negotiate the contradictions in our life, in our sense of self. So this is called demeanour. So in the backstage, we negotiate with our demeanour and the contradictions within it, so that when we've resolved those contradictions, it pops up in the front stage. Now, recent use of front stage we see in Thomas Hood and Dwight van der Wate's focused attention on the very interesting dance between personal identity and social identity. Excellent work. So these theories, as you can see, have really found their moment in our understanding of the online environment. These are interaction rituals. They're not real, they're not true, but a series of sign vehicles that exist on the front stage that activates the sign vehicles of other people's front stage. So the front stage performance is packaged for the consumption of others. The backstage exists to manage the contradictions. Therefore, when a backstage private issue is tested and the contradictions are managed, it pops through to the front stage. Now, what's significant here is audiences are required to sustain the performance on the front stage, and audiences are invested in the front stage. Audiences require this front stage to be real, true, and authentic. So through Goffman, you can see what exactly is happening in our social media interfaces. Particularly, I'm thinking Instagram and particularly LinkedIn, that are supposedly deploying the backstage where you're meant to be testing the contradictions. You're not meant to see it before it pops out. But suddenly what's happening is a front stage is being constructed that appears to be a backstage. And the audience in the front stage is investing in this through the comments and the clicks and the likes. So the investment from an audience renders the front stage real. So the supposed confidence of others is really based almost completely on a Goffman-esque front stage, and it's reliant on the investment of others. It's reliant on the investment of you and me. And you see, it's based on the underconfidence of others to believe the front stage that is being presented. So you can see the issue. Everything in life suddenly becomes a front stage via social media. And backstage behaviours are popping through. Now, this has helped me a lot because I've really, through the last 10 years, have tried to understand why on so many platforms, Instagram's a great example, TikTok's another great example, where backstage behaviours. So why are so many people filming themselves in a car? Why are so many people filming themselves applying makeup, right? These are backstage behaviours that are popping through the front stage, but the contradictions are not resolved. You see the problem? This is different. So these presentations of self remain incredibly confident that are supposedly performing the backstage for an audience, and the contradictions are what's creating the problem that was raised that's really caused this post this week. And that's what's creating, I would argue, the underconfidence. That's what's creating the confusion from the audience, because there's a reconfiguration of the backstage in the front stage, and we don't have the literacy to understand what's going on. Therefore, our second stage is going to take that great phrase, curation of the self, and we're going to take this for a walk and see if it helps us reorganize and summon a literacy for these new times. Now, curating the self and curation of the self, these are phrases to watch, I think, in the next 10 years. The literature at the moment is uneven. It is patchy, but there's just enough material emerging that I can provide a framework for you today, a framework, a trope, a theory for you to consider. And what I'd like us all to think about with this phrase is how we reorganise the self and the self in society when we curate it. So what does this phrase mean? Well, the wonderful Gail Golden published an intriguing book that used this phrase, curation of the self, in 2020 with a reissue in 2023. So the goal of this phrase, she argued, was to block this very problematic phrase, the work and life balance. She thought work and life balance was an absolutely ridiculous phrase. I agree with her, and curation of the self should be its replacement. Interesting argument, let's take it for a walk. But most importantly, she described the goal of the phrase curation of the self as to stop, quote, the cardinal mistake of comparing our own insides with other people's outsides. End of quote. Brilliant. So the goal, and this is crucial, if we can do this, if we can make a decision today to do this, it will change our lives. The goal is to block the comparison with others, to find strategies within ourselves to configure a culture of value of the self. So she argues there's a way to do this, there's a methodology, and it involves us thinking about our lives and separating them into 3 paths or streams. The first one is the stuff that you're not going to do. Right now, you're not going to do this. It's a no. The second stream is the stuff, the things that you're going to be mediocre at, and you're cool with that. And the third stream is the things that you are going to be great at. Excellence is the goal. Fantastic. Now, this is a very intriguing methodology. I like this a lot, and I certainly respect that early and definitive no. So something happens in your life and there's a whole group of things in your life that no is the default answer. That's brilliant. What was challenging for me, but great, is to just be cool with ourselves that there's stuff that we're mediocre at. We're okay, and just be cool with the okay. That's great. And when you do that, this is brilliant. When you do that, then you're leaving the space in your life to develop the time and the expertise for excellence. Brilliant. So you'll notice this new literature on curating the self has no alignment with content creation or influencer culture. This is a very different paradigm and methodology. In this paradigm, curation is an action, it's a behavior, it's an organization. It comes from the Latin root curare, taking care, taking care. So Joel Zalowski argued that what we're taking care of is a considered filtering of our experiences, a configuration of a clear set of boundaries, and making decisions about the components of our life that we are going to share. So this is Goffman's front stage. But 2 of Zalowski's statements have stayed with me. And I feel quite changed by his phrases. And his first question was, quote, would the world notice if you didn't exist? End of quote. And quote, we should all keep quiet unless we can improve upon the silence. End of quote. In many ways, that's sort of the horrific part of the overconfidence in social media. It's the arrogant and narcissistic right to claim space, to claim the right to speak, but it's more than that. It's demanding others listen. It's demanding that others stop their lives and make that human the main character in other people's lives. Talking about last week. So there are ways to handle that. The first thing we need to do is all of us need to block comparisons. We need to assess our strengths and our weaknesses and make active decisions. Boom, come on. Make active decisions about what to share, what is meaningful, what is significant, what is important, and be really respectful of the silences, the lives, the experiences of other human beings. We can therefore curate the self. Now, Michael Barskar described this movingly as, quote, the power of selection in a world of excess. End of quote. That is brilliant. So this selection that all of us requires that all of us reflect, we reflect deeply on what matters and what is of value. The goal is to create what Barskar described as, quote, a purposeful filter. End of quote. That's brilliant, a purposeful filter. If we think about that deeply, that changes our lives. So if curation is taking care, then what it's taking care of are the boundaries in our lives to enable the space for other voices and other views without competition and without judgment. The goal is, as Krista Kennedy has argued so poignantly, quote, a vision of intellectual democracy. End of quote. This is the 3 C's, being centered so that we can connect and create, but also be centered so we can disconnect and be silent. Curation asks that we are patient and that we are consistent. Summoning Gabor Mate in The Myth of the Normal, he argued all of us should move through life with, quote, compassionate inquiry, end of quote, focusing on this key question, quote, why do I think this way? End of quote. Why do I think this way? With these patterns and organisational principles in place, we start to return to ourselves, the deep self, and begin all discussions with a care of that self. Now, once this self is curated and we disconnect from the competition and the bizarre behaviours of others, we start to make different decisions. And that's our final stop for the day. Let's offer 5 interventions today that we can all deploy that will change how we think about ourselves and others. Let's do it. 1, know that social media are not one platform. So make a decision today. Social media are not one thing. And we focus so deeply on the socials and social media, we clump them all together, and that is our first error. Because Facebook is very different from TikTok, LinkedIn is very different from Instagram. Select the interfaces that serve your personal and professional needs and separate the personal and the professional. Now, this means a great deal to me, and I understand the investment in the digital interfaces. I really do. I've lived in 4 countries, I've lived in 12 different cities, and most of my friends, most of whom I've had for 30 years, most of my friends, I have not lived in the same location as them for most of my adult life, and they are important to me. So, for example, Facebook for me is for my friends, and I guard the boundaries of Facebook very, very clearly, and every single post I make on Facebook, I alter and shift the audience for that post. But it remains useful to me because I can have that day-to-day relationship with my friends, and it's allowed me to move around the world. I am grateful for it, because if Facebook didn't exist, I would have lost connection with the 1,000 people that I've met around the world that I care about very, very deeply. So that is a blessing to me. So Facebook, for me, has completely different engagements with it than every other platform. Now, the rest of my interfaces are for work and for work alone, and I use them for very clear and very different dissemination strategies for my research. So I've got very, very clear boundaries. Now, I'm sure you're different, and that's great. I want you to be different. But what I'd ask you to do, think about selecting one particular interface and make that for your personal relationships, and then ensuring others, and select them very carefully, are for professional dissemination. Don't unify social media into a single entity, because it's not. So make the decision today. What interface is personal? What interfaces are professional? Don't select all interfaces. I know there's a lot of volatility in the social media interfaces at the moment. Don't select all of them. No one can be everywhere. Select the ones that are useful for you at this point of your career. Strategy 2, focus on push media and push your publications out. Okay, there are 2 types of media: push media and pull media. Pull media involves you pulling information, pulling content to you. So the scrolling, which can often become doom scrolling, moving through LinkedIn and seeing all these pseudo achievements and being buffeted by them. Okay, so stop today pulling information to you. Certainly until you've got a new information literacy protocol in place, as we've talked about today. So make a decision to only pull information from the interface that you've selected for your friends and family. Then, in all the other social media interfaces, focus on push media. So social media remains crucial for your research dissemination, no doubt about that. But pick the platforms very carefully where you are going to push out and disseminate your research. And the most important thing then is you've pushed it out, that's great. Don't be wedded to the response. Don't be interested in the likes or the comments. Doesn't matter if people like it, that's great. If they don't, that's great. Don't be invested in the audience. So you're pushing your research out through social media, you're pulling in your social contacts and your engagements with your friends. But while you're getting your curation in place now, focus all your energy on push media. Push, and just start to underplay the pull, to train yourself to no longer scroll. Also, avoid pulling information to yourself unnecessarily. There are so many remarkable interfaces that you can use good, strong keywords and achieve great research outcomes. So you can use Google Scholar, you can use the directory of open access journals, you can use academia.edu, and you can do searches and gain new information that way on your terms rather than going to the needs and the goals of others. Okay, 3, address your personal and professional boundaries. The issue with the influencer culture is the assumption that everybody is sharing everything. And this is not the case. And it's really the moment today to tighten up your personal and your professional boundaries. Your private life, my private life, your private life is your business. Your professional life must be highly organized with dissemination tropes to configure it. Please stop assuming that everyone on the planet, that anyone on the planet is interested in you. They're not. They're not. Stop assuming that you have the right to overshare, or even worse, that other citizens have a responsibility to listen to your sharing. Remember my line, we live, we die, our stuff ends up in a skip. That's it, team. That's it. Influencers are lying to themselves and they're lying to all of us. The lie is that a random has a right to offer a view. The planet is in the mess right now because we've got all sorts of randoms confusing their data point of one, their experience, with expertise. You can have a thought and you can keep it to yourself. You can have a truly great personal or professional success and you can keep it to yourself. I'm not saying don't celebrate it. Have a little party for one. Woo, 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 yeah, yeah. I'm a big fan of that. Woo, woo, yeah, yeah, yeah. That success is meaningful to you. That's brilliant. That's great. It doesn't have to be shared to be meaningful. 4, lift the level of your sharing limit. The problem with this proliferating influencer culture, with people randomly recording stuff in cars and bathrooms, is that we all think that we're sort of the main character in everybody else's life. We're not. We live, we die, our stuff ends up in a skip. This is a great moment in history to lift, to reorganize the level at which you share information about yourself. Lift up the level of what you consider to be valuable, important, relevant, and significant. I certainly have reconfigured this recalibration. I do it about once a month. I've done it radically in the last year because I know nothing happens to me at all that matters. I could die right now and it will have no consequence on planet Earth. Full stop. And that's great. That's great. Live quietly, disappear. There's a beautiful sustainability to that. Now, if we start there, that nothing that happens to me at all is important. If we start there, then that radically alters how we share information and what we deem worthy to share on a social media platform. So this week, recalibrate your level of what you consider to be shareable. Start from the premise, no one cares. No one cares. And then, if you think, you know what, that might be important, someone might care about that, share it, but again, don't be wedded to an audience. And please, this is the whole point of our gig today, please don't be wedded to what you read on LinkedIn. Don't value what is being talked about on LinkedIn. Don't validate that mode of sharing in any form. LinkedIn is the Thunderbird 1 of unregulated narcissists. It's not a model for respectful social media use. And 5, please do not have any of your social media accounts up while you're going through your working day. This single maxim will change your life. Use social media as leisure and separate it radically from your working day. Never have those interfaces up or the notifications coming in while you are doing your work. Have schedules for your push related media, so know each day if you've got 5 platforms that you use, then have one moment where you regulate that push media. That's great. And have schedules for the platforms that you deem of personal use. So, for example, work for an hour, work for 2 hours, and then have 5 minutes on your social media platform that you use for personal use. Use it as a leisure, as a break. The world will not end if you're not on LinkedIn or Blue Sky or Instagram for an hour a day, a week, or a year. You select the scope, the scale, your level of involvement. You curate the self for you, not for the consumption of others. Never assume what we think, what we feel, what we value may be valued by others. Curate yourself and curate your relationships with the world. I wish you love, light, and peace. Tea out.